Good afternoon, everyone. This is a follow-up video to my earlier video, which I'll link below, where I used this unity meter to try to get some idea about how loud I was playing this particular Bluetooth adapter IEM combination and how loud they could go. And I found out that my normal setting for these maxed out at about 70 or so dB with pop. And that these are capable of getting these, above 90 dB, but not a whole lot more than that. So that was interesting. And it suggested that my usual listening range, at least using these Truth Year Zero Reds, was in the, below 70 dB range for the most part, because I don't tend to listen to pop that's compressed, and therefore will give you an average number on the meter that's louder than most of what I'm likely to listen to. The caveats with that, of course, is that this meter setup is probably not correct, and I'm not trying to give you guys or give myself necessarily accurate numbers. I just want ballpark numbers. So I've already looked at that. If you're interested in these, you can look at the earlier video. I thought I would try this with a couple of other sets of IEMs that I tend to use. These are JBL Tune 130s. I don't think these are on the market anymore. They've been placed with the Tune Buds or something like that. Anyway, they've changed their branding for JBL. These are okay, but not awesome. Noise canceling, IEMs, that sort of thing. I like these on the subway and sort of environments where the relatively mediocre noise canceling on these does tend to remove rumbling in the background in ways that are helpful. These are Blessing 3s, Moondrop Blessing 3s, and these are probably my normal, not in a quiet location, so I don't want open back earphones. These are probably my normal choice for that. These are quite sensitive, and because of the sound profile of these, they tend to sound loud. So I don't know if they actually are loud. So that will be interesting to see here. The other thing I have is this is a Fiio BTR3K, I think. I always forget the model name of this thing. Interestingly enough, it has an app setting where it's supposed to calculate the maximum volume that we get. And I'm just curious as to how close it is. So I'll put in the numbers for the Moondrop Blessing 3s into the app and see how that coincides here. I've also brought the Apple adapter. This is the Lightning one, but I have a USB-C one as well for use with the computer, which I don't ever use, but I think I don't know, but I think they're the same apart from the adapter at the end. And I'm just curious as to the difference between the volume of that this produces, and I have my old iPad Air over on the right here. You can see it just off the right, which I think gets pretty loud. I think this is more into computer output volume capabilities than something like this is. So I'm just curious. Now this is of course a North American, because I'm in Canada. This is a North American version. My understanding is that the European ones are limited to about 1 volt output, so I don't know. So so the North American ones are going to be louder than the Canadian ones. And I'm going to connect this probably via Bluetooth, but if I don't feel like doing that, I can connect it with a Lightning to USB-C adapter. You have to use a special adapter that puts the iPad into the mode where it thinks it's controlling the USB connection. Normally the iPad assumes that it is receiving a connection from a computer, and that's true of all Lightning devices. So just keep in mind, if you do want to connect something like this up to an Apple device, you can't just use a regular old cable that you would have to charge your device. This is a special one for this purpose, which of course they have not labeled on it in any way. All right, so let's get to doing that. And we'll try some of these. We'll give you some numbers, and I'll see what it means, if anything, at the end of all of this. So let's get set up. I think we'll start with the JBLs first. Okay, we're about ready to get started. The IEMs are set to, the noise canceling is turned off at the moment. And I'm using the same track I used in the earlier video, which is actually the track Blow Up by the Beaches, because it gets loud fairly early on in the track. These are set for halfway, which would represent about the maximum volume I would ever use these things at. So let's see what it says. So obviously when I speak it goes up. But it looks like with this track, its maximum volume is peaking just a little bit below 70 dB. That's very similar to what I found with volume up about halfway with this particular combination. So let's turn them up all the way and see what happens. And it looks like the maximum volume here is sitting about just under 95 dB, which I think is the claimed, let's set that back to halfway, which I think is the claimed maximum output of these on the specs. JBL, of course, has specs. They control the amplifier and the driver. They know exactly how loud these will get. If we try about 3/4 of the way, we're seeing in the 80 range. That would represent about as loud as you should ever possibly consider listening to them. And if we turn it down to about 1/4, we're sitting below 60. And I'll go back to the loudest part of this track. Okay, now just for curiosity, I'm going to turn on the noise canceling and be quiet, because in the background here, I do have the ventilation on quietly. You might be able to hear it hissing. I'm using the microphone in the phone at the moment, not my lav mic, which does tend to filter more of that out. So let's go over here. I'm opening the JBL application, if I can remember where I put it on the iPad. Here we go. JBL headphones application. They don't actually have a tablet version, which is a bit irritating, because if you're setting the equalizer on these, that is potentially useful. Okay, so active noise canceling is now on. I'm going to be quiet. Let's see how low it gets. So I think we're not seeing a lot of effect of it right now. Because most of the noise that this system is getting is transmitted through the table. It's not actually coming in through the IEM. I think if you were to put this up on a pad of some sort, or like a suspension system like you'd use for a turntable, then I think it would work better. I did remember as I looked at this app, one thing that I have done is I do have a small amount of equalization on these things, and I'm going to shut that off, and then we'll just try the numbers again. My guess is they'll be a little louder with that shut off. What I do is these things have a little blip in sort of the upper bass region where they get fairly loud, and then they have, they go down in there, right? So there's a little bit of a hole in their performance right around, centered around 125 hertz or so. Between 125 and 250 hertz, there's a hole. And then they've got a real peak around 65 or so. And then they're pretty good right at the end. So what I do is I put a little S-shaped curve in there, and it really, really improves these things a lot. Again, they're not really on the market anymore, but I suspect the new ones are the same. All right, so I've now got the equalization. I've now got this off. We'll go back to this. We'll set it at 50%. We're at the beginning of the track. Let's see. I don't remember the precise numbers I had before, but it's up a little bit. We'll turn it up all the way. Yeah. Oh. Timed out. So maybe 2 BD of difference, which would make sense because the algorithm, because my maximum boost was about 2 dB, so it will have turned down the gain effectively by 2 dB to normalize that. But these numbers look, again, about the same, around 70, about halfway up. I'm guessing that, again, this is using Apple equipment and this is using Bluetooth, that most IEMs like this are going to behave similarly. All right, so let's shut this off for the moment. We'll take these out, we'll put them back in their case. It would help if I put them in the proper positions. And then let's switch over and let's try the Blessing 3s hooked directly up to the iPad. So I'll stop, I'll set them for, again, a volume that I consider about the maximum that I use with these, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, so here we are with the Blessing 3s. They are plugged directly into the iPad over here. Here, I'll bring that in. You can see reaches on there. And I've got the volume set about 1/3 of the way up, which represents probably about as loud as I would use this particular setting. Again, our baseline here is just under 40, and that's probably mainly rumble from the blower unit that's behind the wall to my right coming through. That represents about as quiet as this room is, unless you know, shut off the heating system entirely. All right, so let's turn this on and let's see how loud this is. So, my impression that the Blessing 3s get really loud really quickly is correct. This is almost 5 dB louder than how I was listening to the JBLs or the Truth Ears. Let's see what halfway does. Halfway is 80 dB, 85 dB. Turn it up all the way. Let's not push these that hard. We're now about 3/4 of the way. So, with this setup, to be safe in terms of the volume of these that you're listening to, assuming, of course, my measurements are in the correct ballpark, you know, about 1/3 or a 1/4 of the volume control on the iPad seems to be a safe spot. So let's stop that again, and let's switch to from using the output built into the iPad and try the Apple dongle. Okay, so now we're connected via the Apple dongle to the iPad. We'll shut this back. We're at about the same volume at 1/3 of the way through, so that was getting to 72 to 75 dB at peaks on this track. And there you go, the Apple dongle is quieter. Halfway shows you the 75 as opposed to 1/3. And its maximum volume on this. Close, still well over 100 dB. But seems to work fairly well. Okay, so I have one more device to try, and that is the Fiio gadget. Now, typically, I use the volume control in the Fiio and adjust so I use the volume control on here, and I don't use the volume control on the tablet. But for the moment, I'm going to turn the volume control on this all the way up. Oh, come on, turn on. All right, we should have it play. It should turn white. There we go. Okay, so it's playing. I'm going to turn the volume on here down to 1/3 and turn the volume on here up all the way. Well, I'll put one on just so. All right. So that's with the volume up all the way on the Fiio. And with it 1/3, we get about, maybe peaking, we'll get up to the loud spot. 65, with it up halfway. Almost halfway. Oh. Yeah, so about the same as the Apple dongle. 75, and then up all the way. So this validates my sort of personal feeling that the Fiio adapter on single-ended mode, as opposed to, it also has a balance mode, but on single-ended mode is pretty well a drop-in replacement for that they sound about the same. A few maybe slight differences. But in terms of volume, in terms of power output, the BTR3K is pretty well, it's this with Bluetooth. Okay, so the next step is we're going to stop this. I'm going to actually pause right now because what I want to do is get this paired with the tablet. We'll go in over Bluetooth, and that'll let me do something else, which I want to show you. So let me do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, well, as I'm talking to you, I'm in the Fiio application, and I'm going to put in numbers here that are appropriate for the headphone sensitivity of the Blessing 3s. So the Blessing 3s are 15.5 ohms, but this doesn't allow you to put decimals in, so we'll put 15 ohms, and the sensitivity information that Moondrop gives you is in decibels per millivolt, but you can convert that in a number of ways to decibels per milliwatt, which is what this needs. So this lets us look at a few things simultaneously. It lets us look at the volume, lets us look at the maximum voltage output. So you can see the maximum voltage output of the BTR3K is 900 millivolts. You can see that when it's set for halfway, it's 15 millivolts, right? And this is using this information and its mil output to calculate the maximum sound pressure level. So what I'd like to do is compare that maximum to what the meter is saying, the sound meter is saying we're getting. Now again, keep in mind, music, even in the loudness wars era, isn't mixed at the maximum volume that the digital file can manage. It's not all sitting in, right up to the maximum possible bit. It's actually set considerably lower, and it depends a bit on the style of track you're listening to. So when we switch to a rock pop track, right, this is pretty loud. This is running fairly close to the maximum. So we're going to keep the volume up here all the way, which is how you would use it with Bluetooth, right? You do it like that, and you use then the volume on the Fiio device to adjust that. So I'm going to turn this on. We'll turn the sound meter back on. I'll turn this on, and we'll go back to the app here. So we're sitting at about halfway. Its peaks are just at about 70, and it's saying that its calculated maximum sound pressure level is almost 86 decibels. So that's maybe a measure of the headroom we have between what we're actually getting and what we're not. And again, this calculation is not super accurate. Minor changes in the impedance actually don't vary it that much, but yeah. So, peaks of maybe 75. So it's about, my general feeling is that these things tend to be about 10 dB down on the maximum sound pressure level this calculates. If we go up to 3/4, the real world peak is almost up to 88. So it's, it's almost up to 90 again. And we'll push it just briefly. Yeah, let's not do that to them. But, we can see that you can definitely get to hearing damaging numbers here. But it does look like if you keep the volume below about halfway, that's all right. But what I think this is useful for, and the reason why I wanted to do this, is I was curious as to how this calculated sound pressure level number compared to what we're actually seeing. And I think for pop tracks anyway, it looks like what you're actually getting is about 10 dB lower. Now again, lots of caveats. This setup is pretty janky. It may not be giving me terribly accurate numbers. It may be changed by moving things, and it's going to depend on the track you listen to, right? If this track probably has more dynamic range than some things. If you're putting on classical music, maybe it would be 20 dB down. Because of course classical music has more dynamic range in general than pop or pop rock in this case. So I think what I find out from this for myself is that I tend to not adjust headphones, IEMs anyway, to volumes anything above about 75, and I actually tend to keep it probably below 70 most of the time. And that seems to be pretty consistent when I played around with this, so that's good for me. It would be helpful possibly for you to figure out what you're doing, and if you have equipment like this, I think this would be a fairly straightforward way of doing it. Now again, this is just ballpark, I don't know, plus or minus 5 dB, maybe. Who knows how accurate this setup is, but it does fit with my personal sort of notions about how loud I thought I was doing it. That does seem to agree with this. Now, I'm trying to consider a way of adapting this setup to use with, not with on-ear or over-ear headphones. I think what I'll do is I'll put some tubing onto a piece of plywood and use that to try to figure out, I'm particularly interested in how the Fiio will drive less efficient headphones. But again, you can see that in the actual safe range, something like this, or even something like this, will drive an IEM to ear damaging levels quite easily. And the arguments for external amps are really only going to be around quality. Is this better quality than that? I don't actually think it is. And around sort of other things. Do you want something that colors the sound, which you can buy amps to do? So for these sorts of IEMs, I don't think power is a a relevant factor, and that would apply to the truthier reds too, that aren't quite as efficient as these, but are pretty close. All right, well, I hope this was useful to someone. Thanks for watching.